I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker. Jennifer and I don't know each other well, but what I do know, and in our brief exchanges, has been incredibly positive, with just a really can-do attitude. She's been with the city 10 months or so, give or take. Comes and we circulated her bio, so you can see her impressive resume of work in the Grant area in Nebraska, with the Disney Corporation. I mean, it's just like an incredibly well-rounded and something that's a really, really good fit with our city's needs. She's a manager of governmental relations, which I think her title probably is a bit of a misnomer, and I think that I'm getting the sense as I talk to others, she's involved in many more things than maybe her title implies. I've asked her today some of the things focus on. We're a downtown organization, about 12,000 people in our geographic area, and growing probably another 30% in the coming 5 or 6 years. So we're interested in growth. We're interested in grant opportunities to the extent that can help fund infrastructure things. And of course, insurance costs that we talked about is something also of interest to our area. So without further ado, and Jennifer knows, she'll be making remarks for 15, 20 minutes, and then taking questions from the board first, and maybe from some of other folks. So Jennifer, take it away. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to try to be fair to those on the screen. If I forget, just holler and I'll turn. I hope I'm as impressive after this presentation as David made me sound, or at least I hope people still like me after this presentation, as David said. And I tend to overtalk, so David, if I'm talking too much, just move me along or tell me it's time to stop. But as David said, I wanted to give first a little bit of an overview of kind of what the projects that fall under my purview at the city, and then focus on a couple of the items, like David said, that are important to this organization. So I will talk a little bit about some of our grants and appropriations that we do, also the legislative items that I tend to cover within an annual basis. And then we do have some special event ordinances. Special event permitting does fall under my purview as well. And we are looking at changing some of the special event ordinances, so I'll go through some of those proposed changes as well. As far as some of the legislative stuff, I'll touch on at least what I know of any insurance items that are happening currently, in the legislation, which is nothing right now, but some of the things that happened last year and what I've heard may come about for this coming year. So those are a couple of things that I'll touch on today. So the first thing that I want to talk about a little bit is the government relations and the legislative side of what I do, and probably 2 slides ahead. I'm probably jumping around. One more. Perfect. And so I'll talk a little bit about the state and federal policies and appropriations. So every year, the City Commission adopts our federal and our state legislative priorities, and also the appropriations that we will be asking from a state and federal level. On October 16th City Commission meeting, we just approved the state. We have not approved the federal yet because we are waiting for our federal appropriation, which we were awarded from Congressman Stubbe this year. We were awarded $1 million appropriation to help fix some of the sidewalks and the safety issues in the Newtown neighborhood. And because of everything going on in Washington, D.C., as you can imagine, that appropriation has not gotten through all the final bills. So until that gets through, we wanted to wait until that was done before we start the federal. But we have completed our state legislative priorities. So as part of my job, I work with our local lobbyists, our state lobbyists, our federal lobbyists. I work with our city commission and our city manager to make sure that we're putting together legislative priorities that make sense for our city. We also then, like I said, put together appropriation requests. So every year we do put through appropriation requests of our state senators and representatives. Last year, we did get 2 appropriations that both our representatives and our senator pushed through for us. They did get approved through all of the committees. and then they got vetoed by our governor. So we did not get those appropriations from that final perspective. So we are gonna try again this year. Last year we had a water quality appropriation that we asked for that did not get pushed through. So we're gonna, again, try again this year, potentially with a different representative that may help us push through. Not that our current one, it was not his doing at all, politics, right? So those are some of the things that fall under the government relations legislative side. This year, we have a whole list of legislative priorities. David, I can make sure I send you that list and you can send it out to the team. Most of those fall under the headings of, again, home rule. That's something we obviously fight for very hard to make sure that the municipalities can make the most of the rules that make sense, or be able to at least put the ordinances in place that make sense for our city. Try to make sure the state isn't preempting some of those. Vacation rentals fall under that. That's something that's very big for us that we want to try to keep control over, so we put that as a legislative priority. Last year, as most of you probably know, there was a Live Local Act that was passed that had a very positive aspect that fully funded an affordable housing grant that has been waiting to be fully funded for quite a while. So that was the positive of that. The negative of that is some of local ordinances were preempted up to the state regarding density and some of those building codes. So this year we are going to push and ask for those to come back. We probably won't get Live Local overturned, but what we're trying to do is take some of those local important aspects of the bill and bring those back to us. So we're going to work on those. So those are a couple of the home rule legislative priorities that are important to us. Obviously, water quality is always important because being so close to the bay, having so many waterways, canals, and those kind of things. So we have a lot of funds and grants that are available through the state. We want to make sure those continue to be fully funded so we can ask for those grants and those appropriations. So we're asking for some of those. Again, making sure that the local organizations are not being held accountable for things we don't have control over. So if there are things in the water, such as the PFAs, those kind of things fall into our water. We don't want to be legally liable for that. If somebody tries to ask us to clean that up, sues us for those kind of things, so we're asking that to be taken out of the legislative or out of the municipal's responsibility. So those are just a couple of them. I won't go through them all because, like I said, I talk a lot and I'm trying not to. But those are some of the legislative priorities that we have in place for this year. We are also asking for 4 appropriations again from the state this year. We have an affordable housing aspect of what we're asking for. We also have a regional water taxi that we are potentially looking to work with Sarasota County and some other organizations to start at least the infrastructure to put in to bring a taxi here that would go potentially from, you know, the Longboat Key area or those places here to the Bay Park. I mean, obviously we haven't decided the specific areas, but at least to start funding the infrastructure for that. So we're asking for an appropriation for that potentially. The Sarasota, the watershed project. So again, keeping our bayous and our canals cleaned up. That's one of the ones we're asking for. And then we're actually doing kind of a really cool project with Moat Marine, which is they are going to be partnering with us. And we're asking for an appropriation to help fund this, to purchase some equipment that Moat Marine would manage. They would report on the data that comes from that equipment, but it would be able to track some of the red tide aspects of the bay, some of the things that come into the bay that we want to make sure that we are monitoring those. So again, we would own the equipment and we would work with Moat Marine to do the data processing and reporting of that. So that's kind of an exciting project that we're looking forward to as well. So those are our 4 appropriations. So that kind of falls under the state and federal legislative priorities and the state and federal appropriations. As soon as we get going with the federal, again, those will all come through the city commission to approve, and then we'll be posting those for everybody to see those as well. So did I miss anything? And then one of the other things that fall under my purview as far as the governmental relations in the legislative is really bill tracking as well. So any bills that are coming through that are going to affect the municipality in some way, shape, or form, again, whether that be from state or federal, I'll be perfectly honest and transparent. It's a little bit harder for us to have a lot of say over federal bills So our federal lobbyist keeps us in the purview of what's going on, make sure we're educated about it. We do let him know if there's things that would be super, affect the municipality. Most of the time, federal bills roll down to the state level. So we potentially worry more about the state bills, and that's what we focus on, though we do have an ear to what happens at the federal level as well. But our state bills are really the ones that we follow. And so again, whether it's the interim session like we're in now, whether it's the full session that'll happen after January, anytime a bill comes through that may potentially affect a municipality, we are working very closely with our lobbyist, and also we are part of the Florida League of Cities to really focus in. That's why we have those legislative priorities I talked about, because that's what triggers what is important to our municipality. If any bill comes through that affects anything that's on that legislative priority, that's where we tend to get involved and really start talking through with our lobbyist and with Florida League of Cities and our other partners, how may this affect us? From a municipality's perspective, we have to kind of walk that fine line, right? We know these legislatures are also those that approve our appropriations. They vote for our appropriations, they support our appropriations. So we have to also make sure we are careful about not to maybe outright oppose a bill that is being brought to the table from a senator or representative that may be somebody that would vote for our appropriation. So instead, what we will do is work with them to, how can we change that language? What are some suggestion ways that we can maybe change some of these that may work or lessen some of the hardships? So we're not going in with a strong oppose on some of these. And then obviously we have our bills that we support very strongly, and we want to show that support for them. We do make trips up to Tallahassee with the city commissioners to go talk to our representatives. We had, I think, a great and a successful trip to Tallahassee last year. We'll also make trips up to Washington, D.C. to meet with our congressmen up there as well. So that's a little bit of the state and federal appropriations and priorities. As far as the bill tracking, I know one of the bills that David asked me to talk about a little bit from a perspective of what is important to this group really has to do with insurance. And as of right now, and we are just in an interim session, there has been no bill that has been introduced yet in interim session that really speaks to or talks about property insurance as of yet. Last interim session, and I don't know how familiar you guys were with this bill, there was an interim bill passed. It was Senate Bill 2A. And that was passed with some changes made to the two state insurance policies that was meant to help some of the problems that we are having with insurance here in the state of Florida. The biggest issue, well, the two biggest issues being the premiums that keep going up and up and up. The other thing is the fact that people are also getting dropped and insurance companies are leaving Florida. So some of the things that were passed in that bill that was meant to potentially bring down some of the premium costs and also to encourage more insurance companies to come into the state of Florida. The reason why they want to do that is obviously the more insurance companies, the more competitive the pricing is, hopefully the premiums will get pushed down. So some of the things that they passed in that bill from last interim session in December of 2022 actually removed the ability to have your attorney fees paid by the other party. So if you're going to sue somebody, whether it's the insurance company or whether it's the insured, they have to pay their own insurance or their attorney costs. We may not like the sound of that if we're the ones that are suing, but what that does, again, or at least the philosophy behind that, is the insurance companies aren't worried about having fraudulent lawsuits that they're going to have to pay in attorney's fees for. So again, the theory is that's going to encourage them to come into the state. They're not as worried about frivolous lawsuits, because that was something that was happening here in Florida, because some of the laws in Florida dealing with insurance weren't as cleaned up as some of the other states and did allow some of these fraudulent lawsuits. So some of the laws were put in place to help with that. The other thing that they put in place is assignment of benefits is now prohibited. So that was something that was a problem for people who were insured, and there were contractors that were going out and having people sign over their benefits because that was allowed in Florida at the time, and then you didn't know what you were signing over. Now you have no rights to those benefits because you just assigned them to the contractor. Again, those were driving up frivolous lawsuits. They were driving up some of the premiums. So there were things like that that were put in place from this bill. that they are hoping to see some encouragement to bring more insurers into the state. In full transparency and honesty, in the articles that I've read and some of the people I've talked to, premiums have not come down. So they have not seen a decrease in premiums as of now. They have seen, from what again I'm hearing, they have seen an increase in insurance companies that are interested in coming into the state of Florida. And so they are getting people to register, other insurance companies to register here in the state of Florida. That was another thing of the bill, is they have changed the registration process for those companies. Again, trying to make sure the companies that are coming here are reputable insurance companies. So those were some of the items in the bill. There were a few other things, but those were the big ones that they talked about to really bring that cost down. So, and at the end, if you guys can interrupt me at any time to ask questions, or again, we'll have Q&A at the end if you guys have any questions.
Let's do that again.
Okay, perfect. So the other thing as far as bill tracking, you know, again, I keep track of any of the bills that are important to the municipality throughout the year. I'll share those with Marlon, our city manager, and our city commissioners, so they can keep in the loop of them. But as you all know, bills change so substantially throughout the entire session that what is important at the very beginning may change so significantly towards the end. So it really is towards the end of session that we get busier to try to figure out how are all these going to affect the city. So it's a busy time from here on out, I would say, for the bill tracking. So that covers a little bit of the government relations and the legislative, from the legislative piece that I cover. The other thing is there's a couple special projects that I do work with our city manager on as well. Two of those are development projects that we are looking at doing in the city. The Bay Park, obviously everybody knows what that is. Phase 1 was completed last year. They just had their big 1-year anniversary event 2 weekends ago, which was very successful. I heard they had, was it 20,000 people, I think, that came to that event over the course of a 5-day event. So they had a lot of people coming to celebrate their 1-year anniversary. So phase 2 is actually starting right now. So phase 2 is the next 14 acres that they are going to be developing at the Bay Park. Phase 1 was approximately 14 acres as well. Phase 2 is about a $65 million 14-acre project that they're going to be starting now. It'll take about 2-3 years from what I'm hearing to complete. So 2026 is what they're looking at from a completed perspective of that. And phase 2 really talks about, and I really should have put it more on the map so I could have pointed to it, but phase 2 will look at enhancing the cultural district, and the cultural district of the Bay Park is where that kind of runs from the Blue Pagoda, if you know, or the Garden Club, and then there's the Blue Pagoda, there's the Chitsey Library, the old library, so they're actually going to be bringing that back up and house either some opportunities for people to hold events in there or office space. They're not exactly sure what they're going to use that for yet. We've got the Municipal Auditorium and the Bayfront Community Center in the back that they can rent out for cultural events and those kind of things. So the Art Center is there. So we're going to kind of look at cleaning up that area, putting in more walkability in that area, encourage people to come down to that area, come to the Art Center, and do more of the events that they're holding there. The Dockside Canal District, so they're going to be putting in some new floating docks in that area. And they're also going to be putting in some temporary restaurants. They're not putting in any permanent restaurants yet because they have to get the infrastructure in for that, but they'll have some temporary, meaning that if a storm is coming, you know, that restaurant has to be able to move, whether it's food trucks or just be able to be taken down for that storm event. So they are going to be putting some of those in there. They're going to potentially increase some of the boat ramps that are there as well. And then a big part of this is really creating that resilient shoreline. So making sure that we have the grasses coming back for our wildlife, making sure that the shoreline isn't falling in to the bay, and making sure that we're cleaning up all of the storm water and everything before it goes into the bay. They did that as part of phase 1. It was very successful, so they're looking to make sure they do that all for phase 2 as well. Oh, and creating the Sunset Pier as well. So they're going to have a pier that sticks out into the water that people can go enjoy, walk on, fish on, so that'll be there as well. And then another part of the project that I'm working on with the city manager is the Sarasota Performing Arts Center. So that will potentially be part of the 53 acres of the Bay Park when the entire 53 acres is completed. That's obviously not set to be done, you know, before probably 8-10 years, right? The entire 53 acres. The Sarasota Performing Arts Center may be part of that project. And so right now we are working with the Sarasota Performing Arts Foundation to do the legwork on how this may be brought to fruition. So we are working now with the foundation to select a design architect, which was done through a committee that the foundation and the city had put together. There was a design architect that was selected. We are waiting for that design architect to get licensed here in Florida, which I'm told is almost done. And then we'll start negotiating with that design architect. Once they have, if we get that design architect to agree to our contract terms, then they'll start creating the design for what that Performing Arts Center could potentially look like. That'll give us a cost and all of those items as well. So right now we're in the very early stages of that, but once we get the design architect under contract, we should be able to provide a bit more information with that. Both of these projects are funded through a city and a private and a public partnership. So with the Bay Park, the city has partnered with the Bay Park Conservancy, which is a 501c3, and with the Sarasota Performing Arts Center, the city has partnered with the Performing Arts Center Foundation, which is also a 501c3. So for the Performing Arts Center, our agreement is a 50-50 funding split with them. So they provide 50% of the costs through private donations, through grants, through anything that they can do as a 501c3. And then the city would provide 50% of the funding, again, through grants, potential appropriations, and a big part of that for both of these projects is also TIF funding. So that's how we have the partnerships in place for both of those projects. The next area that I work on is the grants and for the city, and I'm lucky enough to have an amazing grants coordinator who does all of the heavy lifting and all of the research for this. But we do a lot of grants here in the city. We do both federal and state grants. So the big part of that is just doing the research and finding the grants, right? And so I had Amy pull some statistics on, you know, how many grants do we kind of look at within a specific month period, and how many of those actually come to fruition, right? Because there's a lot of grants that we have to do the research on that sound fantastic. People send us grants all the time, but when you really dig into it, there's a lot of things that maybe won't work for the city. First and foremost, one of them is they usually almost have matching funds, right? So they say, we're gonna give you $1 million grant, that's fantastic, but we have to provide 50% matching funds, right? So when we look into some of these grants, we have to make sure as a city it makes sense from a return on investment perspective, and that we have it budgeted and that it really is going to pay for the project and make sense for the project. So Amy does a lot of that research for us. A lot of the federal grants also have a lot of reporting requirements that go on for years. So again, looking at it from a return on investment perspective, we need to make sure it makes sense from, you know, what is this going to require? How many extra environmental studies do we have to do for this? What is that going to cost the city? So those are all things that we put into from a time perspective to make sure the grants make sense. So they may filter out, she can do, within the last 6 months, she looked at over 100 grants that then whittled down to about 13 grants that we applied for. And I know 13 grants sounds not like a lot, but we're talking tens of millions of dollars that go into those 13 grants, to be honest with you. On top of that, we currently have about 36 grants that have already been executed, and they could be from 2 years ago to 5 years ago to 2 months ago that we're managing. And again, managing meaning we're sending out reporting on those grants. We're making sure we're getting invoiced for the expenditures that we put out for those grants. And right now, for just those 36 grants, it's a little bit under $50 million that we have just for those 36. So again, the numbers may not sound large, but for a city like Sarasota, the amount of funds that we get from that is actually a pretty big amount. Throughout the city, we have different funding areas, and I've only put like 3 on here because we have so many that we fund for as far as projects. Transportation is probably the biggest one that we get the most of our grants from, or at least the biggest high-end dollar amounts for our grants. And I will say our transportation team is fabulous under Nick Patel. Alvi and Corinne are the 2 that work under this, and they do almost all their own grant research. They do almost all their own grant writing. They are absolutely fabulous, and they have so many projects going on right now. I told Nick I would give him a little plug because he is going to be presenting at a commission workshop on November 13th. And within that commission workshop, he's going to be talking about his engineering manual that they're putting together. So he does have that he's going to talk about, but they're also going to talk about a lot of the transportation projects that they're looking at as far as for the downtown area. And some of those projects that he said that they would be talking about are the Main Street Complete Streets project. And we're actually looking at a Safe Streets grant for that to be able to pay for some of that. Also St. Armand's, they're looking at doing a partial complete street. Can I say that? Is that like a oxymoron, a partial complete street? They're looking at also a Protect grant for that. So we do have some grants that are coming into some of these transportation projects that they're looking at. Fruitville Road is another one, which at this time, we don't have a grant that fits that one, but we're continuing to research that. And then Boulevard of the Arts in 10th is also another project that they're going to be talking about on the 13th. That one they are looking to fund with the RAISE grant, which is a federal grant. We have applied for the RAISE grant the last 2 years, and we have been unsuccessful in getting that. But every time we apply for it, we sit down with the grant department, from what I hear, and we have great feedback to help us build that grant application each year. So we're really excited this year to put that grant back in place for the Boulevard of the Arts and 10th Street project. So those are some of the transportation projects and some of the grants that we're looking at to cover some of those. We work very closely with the Bay Park. We apply for grants for the Bay Park under our name. That again goes to that funding responsibility that we have. The Bay Park, additionally on their own, will apply for grants that they're, that they can apply for as well. So we are able to do grants for both the city and the Bay Park there. We do a lot of FEMA grants, as you can imagine. So anytime we have storms or disasters, a lot of Amy's time is doing FEMA grants. We also have a big project right now that we are partnering with the county. So it's the CDBG Disaster Recovery Grant. Typically that is a HUD grant, meaning those grants are usually used for housing, affordable housing within the city. This one is particular to mitigating any disasters that happen in Sarasota County. So Sarasota County was actually just awarded a $200 million grant for this project. They are working with surrounding municipalities, including the city, to be able to have an application process. So we weren't awarded the grant directly. The county was awarded that grant. We then will work with the county to do an application process. So we have submitted about 14 projects to the county, and almost all of those projects deal with some sort of mitigation within the city to help when disasters happen again. So we have a lot of, again, transportation projects in there, a lot of road projects, making sure we're raising the roads if they're prone to flooding, so people can exit. So there's a lot of those kind of projects in there as well. The other big part of the CDBG that the county is working on with that is housing. Not only building affordable housing, but looking at housing that's throughout the county that are in flood zones that continually get hit. So they're looking at doing reimbursements for people who have already paid themselves to help rebuild or reconstruct their homes. They're also looking at a voluntary buyout. So if it's a home that is hit very often, is in a flood zone, there's requirements that you have to meet, you actually may qualify for a buyout. And in that case, the municipality or the county would then agree to take on that land and keep it as open space, public space, municipal space, so they can't, again, build on it and continue to have those problems. So we're working really closely with the county on that grant as well.
Terrific.
One more thing. Okay. Am I up on time though, David?
We're getting
Okay, I promise I'll
close,
be really
so
fast.
please, if you could.
Last
please.
thing, special events ordinances. So we are, and I won't go through all of them, but if anybody has any questions on them. So again, special event permitting does fall under my purview, meaning if there is somebody who wants to do a special event, either on public property or on a public right-of-way, they have to go through a permitting process through my team. We have ordinances in place that dictate when a special event permit can be approved, when a special event permit can be denied. There's also regulations for that event organizer on what they have to do as far as following regulations. So there are some things that we are proposing to change in that ordinance that will limit some of the special events that can happen downtown as far as the number of them, a little bit more requirements that the event organizers may have to follow. So there's some of those that we are cleaning up as well in the ordinances. So like I said, I won't go through those, but we will be having an town hall to go through the ordinances. We're hoping to do that in December. The ordinances are with the city attorney right now for him to review. And then once I have his blessing, we'll schedule the town hall and we'll go through all of those special event ordinances before we obviously bring them to the city commission.
Terrific.
Okay.
Okay, let's, board members, Bob,
Yeah,
questions?
simple question. When you mentioned for grants, they usually require 50% from the city. Is that a hard, fast number, or are there times when you can get 100% grant, 75% grant?
Yes, great question. So it is not a hard and fast. So not all grants require 50%. We are lucky enough to find some grants that they'll fully fund. Those are very, very rare. I will say that. We don't get very many opportunities to have 100% grant. There's at least some sort of match that we have to do. Not always 50. Sometimes there's 30%, sometimes 20%. And the nice thing as well about that is you don't always have to bring hard cash, right? So we can put in administrative time. So when we look at those grants, we also look at if there's going to be a lot of administrative time, let's say from planning department, right? If they're putting together new zoning text amendments or something like that, we can use all of that time as our match. So it doesn't always have to be hard funds as well.
Are you allowed an indirect rate on those? An indirect cover administrative overhead?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't know if it's an indirect rate or if it's just hour for hour.
Sometimes the percentage 28% or 13, whatever the federal agency may approve.
Right, right. And there might be different requirements for each one. So yeah, that's a really good question.
Others with Victor?
I know at one point in time, there was some discussion about a raised platform in Boulevard of the Arts and Tamiami Trail. And grant was applied for, but unfortunately didn't come through. Are you all going after that grant again?
I believe that is the raised grant that Nick was talking about, which they are going to be going for again this year, is specifically for the Boulevard of the Arts and the 10th Street project. So yes.
Yes, not 10. Boulevard of the Arts and Tamiami.
Oh, in Tamiami. I promised Nick I wouldn't make up anything. So he said, if I can't answer anything, I'm supposed to say, I'll get the answer and bring it back. Or he said, you guys can come to the 13th, the meeting on the 13th. But I will absolutely get that answer for you, Victor, and get it to you guys. Yeah, for sure.
And one other thing.
Yes.
A lot of talk in my part of the world, which is the Boulevard of the Arts, about parking along Boulevard of the Arts on Tamiami Trail all the way to the Rosemary, through the Rosemary. Is there an effort to get grant of some kind in order to enhance the parking opportunity?
We are always talking parking. I am not aware of any specific project in the works right now to do any specific parking along that way. But again, I will absolutely check with Nick on that and also with Steve Cover, our planning department, and see if they have anything in either their comprehensive plan. So they have a 5-year comprehensive plan that we can look at and see. And then also our 10-year comprehensive plan for the planning department. So I'll definitely look into that and get back to you guys.
Quick question on the town hall that you're closing for the special events that's
Yes.
coming up. And that is to a town hall for who is being invited to this town hall?
So it'll be, I mean, it's open to the public,
Sure.
so anybody from the public can come. We are obviously specifically reaching out to anybody who has applied for a special event permit in the last year, or anybody who has held any sort of special event within the last year. Merchants within the areas of those special events, we want to make sure they're all very aware of it. Most of the changes will affect the event organizers and what they're doing as far as the process of applying for a special event, but it is open to the public and anybody will be allowed to come.
So affected persons of affected status that are in there, will they be notified as well? Condos or?
When we put out the public notice, yeah, we can look at making sure the associations are aware of that as well.
Jennifer, first of all, I applaud the work on the grant front. I know how tedious and meticulous it is. I think there's one observation that I've had, and I've been involved for 4 or 5 years in the Boulevard of the Arts intent, is that it feels like some of our projects are, we either get the grant or it doesn't happen. And the concern being just with the growth and businesses and, missing opportunities. For example, on Fruitville, as an example, development is starting along there with condo projects.
Right.
If we don't get on with planning for that now, we're gonna end up with a hodgepodge of designs as opposed to, I'm not gonna say a blank canvas. We know how ugly and dangerous and what a moat it becomes psychologically to get improved connectivity.
Right.
So it feels to us that grants are important, but this opportunity to piece together either multimodal impact fees or in the case of Boulevard of the Arts, TIF money or something, rather than betting the farm the third time on the RAISE grant,
Right.
which we were very actively involved in DSCA and getting 30 letters of support, I think.
For that.
So we'll do it again, but you seem to feel they were optimistic, somewhat optimistic last year. Is the third time a charm? And I mean, seriously,
Yeah.
is there the politics being what they are, given the politics of our state and who's in Washington these days? Any reactions to that?
I personally wouldn't be able to answer that question probably very well, David. I did ask the question, what feedback are we getting when we are not getting the grant in the last 2 years? And really, the response that I got back was, we are getting positive feedback from the grant coordinators and the department in which we submit the grant to, meaning there's not much that they're telling us we need to change in our approach or in how we're writing up the grant, that when it gets to who is picking the grants, they are picking their pet projects. And so from that perspective, what at least I hear, and this is just Jennifer Jorgensen talking, this is nobody else at the city talking, what I hear in that is, at least from what I can do, is that's a call to my lobbyists pretty quickly on the federal side to be able to say, what are we missing as far as whose pet projects and who do we need to be in there talking to these particular departments to make this one of their pet projects so we can be selected. And so I can only say that from my perspective and from what I have control over. But again, in talking to those that are applying for the grants, we're not hearing feedback that there's much we can do to improve the writing of the grant itself.
I've got one more connectivity. You mentioned the water taxi, and we
Yes.
all think we know the success of the trolley,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And built in the VO kind of thing, relatively successful. You weren't around when we had the iRide vehicles. You're familiar with the gotcha stroke iRide?
The concept of it, yeah.
The 6-passenger or whatever it seems to, I think, DSCA, that maybe that didn't work as well when it was because we now have a different dynamic. We've got more people. Have we reached critical mass? In other words, with the quay developing a little bit too far for some people to walk downtown, with the big apartment building out by the movie theater, a little bit too far. We think there's a real opportunity when we talk about connectivity of complete streets, but connectivity in these electric vehicles to alleviate some of the parking issues or enhance business and things like that. I guess my question is grant opportunities for those kinds of things. Is that something you've been asked to look at?
Absolutely. So we have, as part of our legislative priorities, David, the whole multimodal transportation is a big legislative priority for us. That also includes a lot of CAV, electric stations that we would put throughout. Nick told me about a project that I'm not supposed to talk about, so I won't, because I don't want to get in trouble with Nick. But just the fact that they are absolutely looking at other opportunities we are going for grants in those areas for sure. There is, and I can't remember the name of it, but there is a CAV specific grant that Albie is looking at that I know Amy's helping her with as well. And I can look into that and see if I can find what the name of that is, David. So it's definitely something that we know as a priority and have put in as a legislative priority to not only push funding for that, but also to make sure we are doing the research and looking for that as well, so.
We're basically out of time. Is there anybody dying for one last question here of a member reps? Okay, well, thank you. You've been fantastic.
Perfect.
We
Thank
learned some things, and we certainly look forward to working with you. And I think we got some real opportunities here that we hope to work on as we grow downtown another 3,000 or 4,000 people. So
Sounds
we
great.
want to be ready. So,
Thank you all.
thanks
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. I appreciate it. Thank
Okay.
you.